You're listening to the Nonprofit State of Minds podcast, an Angel Oak Creative production.
Hey everybody, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Welcome to the latest episode of our Nonprofit State of Minds podcast, where we pick the brains of nonprofit leaders and talk about what's happening, the trends, the challenges, the opportunities in the nonprofit sector. We've had some really great guests lately talking about a variety of topics from security, cybersecurity to what was the latest one? Um, Man, I'm drawing a blank now, but just some amazing topics about really pertinent issues that are facing nonprofit sector. One recently that comes to mind is the weathering the storm of all of these crisis fundraising issues that are coming up. So, thankfully, we've got another great set of guests today. We've got Gail Perry and Kathryn Gamble from the Gail Perry Group. Gail is CEO and founder. Kathryn Gamble is Executive Vice President. So welcome to both of you.
Hello, hello. Hi, David.
Thanks,
Uh,
Dave. It's always great to be with you. Thank you for
Well,
having
thank
us.
you. Gail Perry Group is a partner of Angel Oaks along the way. We've done a number of projects with them. They are, I would gather I would guess, and probably suggest that you all are probably one of the most respected fundraising consulting firms out there, especially when it comes to major donors working, and I'll let you share some of your experience, but just know that you all have worked with major universities and large organizations, also some smaller ones, but certainly if anybody has questions about major donor giving, Gail and Kathryn and her team are just amazing experts at that. So grateful for that, and they just bring so much to the sector. So thank you all for that. Yeah, Gail, you want to just talk a little bit just about Gail Perry Group and kind of what you all do and
Yes, we're a capital campaign consulting company, and we also help organizations develop and build major gift programs and expand them. We've been putting out, what would you say, Catherine, thought leadership into the sector for years.
probably
Long time.
decades, right?
Yeah,
I
right a
don't have
long
a problem.
time.
We always have so many ideas and want to talk about them.
Yeah.
But we're growing. We have projects all over the country. Although we're headquartered here in North Carolina, our home base is here. I
Mhm.
started my fundraising career at Duke, and then I went over to Chapel Hill, and then I started our company, gosh, almost 30 years ago. How about you, Catherine?
Wow.
Oh gosh, I've been around forever. What can we do? My whole career has been around campaigns and major gifts, mainly, and worked in a number higher education, secondary education, and the last thing I did as a practitioner was at the North Carolina Museum of Art. So, um, and then I've been in consulting for over a decade. So, which I love, I might add, because the opportunity to be able to share all the experiences, good, bad, and ugly, in a way that helps people maybe short track those things and skip
Yeah.
over them and be more successful. You probably see this a lot too, David. A lot of times what our role is we are affirming people as they're trying to figure out navigate a capital
Yeah.
campaign, navigate building a major gift program or whatever the case is. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you all do some amazing work. I've learned so much from you and am just grateful that you're willing to share some of that wisdom today. Um, this conversation came to be. I was talking with Kathryn and Gail a little bit, and actually, I caught one of your blog posts about changing the mindset of fundraising. And I thought, that's a little challenging. That's a little bit counter to, I think, what some people are thinking right now. So I think it would be helpful for our listeners and others to hear what that looks like and why it's important right now. So, can one of you describe what is the fundraising landscape right now? How is it different than maybe what it was even a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago or so? What is that? What's the land? How would you describe it?
And volatile, chaotic, full of fear.
Mhm.
On the funder side, there's so much change and so much disruption. That's might be a good word, disruption. And then on the organization side, we see so many organizations pulling in
Mm,
and sort of retrenching and making decisions out of fear as opposed to the future. What do you think,
yeah.
Kat?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. Disruption is a good word. I mean, government funding, that's a key issue nowadays. That's been a significant source. If you aggregate it for all nonprofit organizations, government funding is a significant percentage of that, as is earned income for nonprofits. I'll also add that. Philanthropy is important, but it happens to be the smaller of those. And when we begin to, and I would say this, also disruption creates change, and we're all human. Humans don't particularly like to change.
That's right.
And so change is a very difficult thing to navigate. And this to what David was starting to ask about, why mindset is so critically important in order to navigate change. The other piece of it is also, will say this, when we think things are all good and we're in control of stuff, which is an illusion at best to begin with, because you were never in control of anything. But we can fool ourselves that we are. So when disruption comes around and changes that narrative for us, then that's when we begin to feel the fear, or just discern not discernment, the disconcertedness, I guess is the word I'm looking for,
Yeah.
of the moment. And I
Yeah.
think that's what everyone's dealing with. And so, um, you know, just to even say to oneself, change is always around us,
Yeah.
and kind of say, okay, I'm going to accept change is always there, and I'm going to take on an abundant mindset.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
we'll
and
talk.
doesn't
Let's
it
talk
feel
about.
like, I mean, the it with, I mean, you all have been doing this longer than I have. I've been around, the nonprofit sector now for 11, 12 years or so. But even in just that short period of time, in a decade, we've seen COVID, we've seen wars, we've seen, some, you know, maybe not quite recession, but we've seen some financial, some economic challenges go on. How is this different than some of those, or is it?
And Kathryn and I also were active during the Great Recession.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And we remember that. And then
Mhm.
before that, I was at Carolina, and it was the stock.com bubble
right.
Mhm.
turn
Yeah,
of the century. So it's like every 10 years or so, there's this huge wave,
Mhm.
shakes, rattles, and rolls
Mhm.
everything.
yeah.
So I'll tell a story in that regard, if I may. So yes, I was at the North Carolina Museum of Art starting a large campaign in 2006-07 fiscal year, so '07
Mhm.
fiscal year. The
Yeah,
first year of that campaign, we raised just over $10 million in commitments, and then the bottom fell out. The recession occurred. Interestingly enough, the campaign, we raised $4 million in that year of the downturn, the big one. And here's the way you could look at it. You could look at it like, oh, we only raised $4 million because the year before we raised 10, or you could look at it, we still raised $4 million. Okay.
right.
So the point is that while there's all this environmental, I like to, got to frame it. It's in the environment. And the environment is always somewhat unstable, look, to some degree. That there's variance in that. But here's the thing, donors still want to give away their money. Right? That doesn't change,
Right,
really. Okay, the magnitude of what they give could change. The
right,
timing of what they give can change. So we can either be chicken little about it, so the $4 million versus the $10 million thing,
right.
and go, oh, that's so awful. We only did blah, 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 Or we can be, more abundant in our thinking and thinking, okay, we need to just look at our timing and maybe be cognizant and talk to the donors about their timings and their attitudes and their feelings about what's going on in their environment, so to speak, and find out what will work. So what ultimately happened with the museum, we still raised the $50.6 million. We just had to add some time onto that campaign to
Yeah,
allow donors to recover, the economy a little bit to recover, but more importantly, the donors to feel confident about their giving away their assets, their wealth to the art museum at that moment in time, and balance that with the other philanthropic things they were doing. They did not stop being donors.
Right.
Fast forward to COVID, that's another mistake that many organizations made is they stopped fundraising, thinking they needed to be, that was the care they needed to offer the donors. When donors were looking for places, 2021, even adjusted for inflation, is still the biggest year on record.
Wow.
In philanthropy. Biggest year.
Wow. And that's, yeah, I mean, I think it was Gail who mentioned this phrase about being relentlessly optimistic, right? And if we don't have, if we're not that, we might not as well even try.
Right.
Talk
And
about
I
that,
think
Gail.
there's a story I tell in a lot of my workshops about Kathryn's a runner, but I am not a runner. And I hope I never run a race.
I
She
only
wouldn't
run if
know.
somebody's chasing me, Gail. So
I'm a bad dog, you know. But, if I were going to run a race, I would not be looking at the lady next to me with her fancy outfits and looking so svelte and everything. And I know the runner over here has won all these medals and she's got the best coach in the country, you know, and I'm not going to run the race thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose. Instead, I'm going to beat both of these people and I'm going to win. And my goal is my goal and I can do it. And so I think that's a great analogy for how many nonprofit people tend to pull themselves in
Mm,
this fear thing. And I have a whole lot of issues with nonprofit boards, and I'm a long-suffering board member myself. But I think because decision making with boards tends to be consensus,
mm,
it means that the most conservative, least aggressive decision is the one thing everybody can agree on.
wow.
And so therefore you do not have an opportunistic or a go-go optimistic attitude about what is possible for our organization and how do we make our mission flourish in this environment.
Well, risk is a four-letter word. So, you know,
Certainly is.
you know, so, you know, people treat it like one anyway, right? I mean, nobody wants to step out of their comfort zone
We were
and
just on the West Coast with a client, an independent school, and we were encouraging the board members to think broadly. Remember that, Kathryn?
Yeah, it was great. That was
Um,
great. They did a good job.
They had a lot of questions about the giving environment, the
oh
philanthropic.
yeah.
And so people are reaching out to us all over the country saying, what is your take? What are our opportunities? How can we be successful
Yeah.
in this terribly volatile
Mhm.
environment? And we
Well, it's one thing. Oh, go ahead, Kathryn.
I was just going to say, but that right there also speaks to the importance of fundraisers staying abreast of the trends
Hmm.
and using those opportunities to educate board members. I think you keep in mind, to Gail's point, most board members, they don't realize there is a whole environment out there around fundraising or that there are even trends to look at. They have no idea most of the time that there's research and data available and information. I'm sure there very few of them are probably even aware of the Chronicle of Philanthropy or that there's even anything published
Yeah.
out there about this. So the more fundraisers can share this type of information with their boards, it will help. May not
Yeah.
solve everything, but it will help.
Yeah, and there's some great, I mean, like MR Benchmarks does some really good work. I really encourage clients to subscribe, you know, to those newsletters. So yeah, the information is out there. You just have to be willing to go look for it. You
Well,
know, Gail, you mentioned this mind shift, this mindset shift. How do you flip the switch though? I mean, how, you know, it's one thing to say, oh, we got to change the way we think, but then to actually do it, what is that? How do you do that?
well, everything starts in here.
Yeah.
Everything starts, whatever you create, what you're going to cook for dinner starts in here, you know.
And
And,
Gail's pointing to her head for those who are listening, just to make sure they know. So,
and so we're always trying to get people to change their thinking. And remember, there's thinking and then there's feelings. They're both of those
hmm
things. So I think, Kathryn, they have to be addressed.
Mhm.
because one of my favorite gurus says, think, believe, feel. You
Mm,
start with your thoughts, but people have to realize that they're, especially board members and leaders, that they own this mission of this organization, and it's incumbent upon them to make it successful in the community. And are they going to think opportunity? Are they going
mm,
to think investment? Are they going to
yeah.
think creative strategies? I don't know. And so we give a lot of pep talks, don't we, Kathryn?
We do give it a lot of pep talks.
Well, is there this conversation you even had recently with the board and all?
Mhm.
What's some of the resistance? I mean, is it just the old we don't do it that way, or is it more complicated than that?
They don't understand how it works.
Okay.
When you say, Kathryn, they don't
Yeah,
understand.
it's more they don't understand, really,
Talk
really.
about that a little bit. What's that gap? What's that ignorance in a not a negative way, but just what's that gap?
Well, I would say it goes back to not understanding context in a lot of
Mm,
ways. I mean, I think a lot of times board members think that that organization just exists in and of itself,
mm,
and that whatever strategy they don't understand strategies, the ways should be applied. Some board members I've run across don't really understand nonprofits and
mm,
how they operate in full. So understanding their role, but they don't understand the context for their role. So not just the organization's context, but the organization's context in the environment. And that's why sharing information like we're talking about is so critical to help their understanding.
Got to educate your board about
Mhm.
how it all works,
Right.
especially the major donors, because we're pointing our clients in the direction of major donors, because for the past 10 years in the US, the gifts and the checks have gotten bigger, but the numbers of donors have gotten smaller.
mm,
So we have a smaller donor pool. So therefore, you've got to think broadly about, you've got to learn how major gift fundraising works. You don't just blurt
yeah.
out and ask. A lot of board members think you go out there and ask, like, give me a break. It would be an affront. And so a lot of our work within campaigns and with major gift training and coaching is to help people understand the process.
Mm.
Very humane. It's very
Mhm.
kind. It can be even fun, can it, Kathryn?
It sure can. And David, you all were a partner with us on our client Cumberland Heights
Yep.
in Tennessee. And, they are a great example of what Gail is talking about. We were able to help the board and their campaign leadership, which was made up many board members, understand this different approach, this more relational approach to fundraising, even in the context of a campaign. And it's their success is significant. They're thrilled beyond belief. And
Great.
the board members are saying this, which is great. And they're talking about the strategy, which they understood. I'll never forget the moment I saw like the light bulbs go off in their minds. And it was really a great step forward for them. And they're being very successful.
So what does that mean to, we're talking about maybe some larger organizations, but what does that mean to the mid-sized organization that, we see out there that's, the million or 2 million, 3 million, kind of operating budget, maybe 10 million, somewhere in that range, what does it mean to them? Is it the same? Or is there a difference for them?
I think that again, who's making the decisions? There are
Right.
opportunities out there, but they're going to require a little bit of investment,
Mm.
and that is a challenge
Oh,
for
that's a dirty word, investment.
this is money to take.
Another dirty word. It's not 4 letters, but it's still board
Maybe it's
members.
is it 4 syllables?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
three, but
board members hate the investment thing.
yeah, they
So,
don't like it.
I was reading, I read widely in the fundraising and philanthropy press, and there was a quote last week of some organization was saying, do we need to invest more resources in major gift fundraising, or should we ramp up this particular aspect of our fundraising program? And the answer is yes, because every organization, no matter how small, has got donors who are very passionate and loyal, who will
yeah.
if they're properly involved and approach would be thrilled to help out in a greater degree. But
Yeah.
I find the smaller organizations, and Kathryn, you might agree with me here, the smaller organizations are less comfortable with that approach than the larger organizations. I mean, we
Mm.
both have university backgrounds and major gifts. This is how you do it, boobity boobity boo. But
Yeah.
I'm working with a small social service agency, and they send out a paper letter once a year, and they're afraid to ask any more than that.
Oh, I had that exact
Talking about his
conversation.
friend, going, gosh, ladies, let's be a little bit more
Yeah.
forward
Yeah.
thinking here.
Well, you mentioned, and we've kind of talked around it a little bit, but this part of that mindset shift is keeping your donors close, right?
Yes,
That
yes.
it's not and being vulnerable, but also being strong, right? So strength, vulnerability, and strength, or maybe something along those lines. Talk about what does that look like to keep your donors close? I mean, most people would say, I keep my donors close. I know, I reach out to them a couple of times a year, and I send them a direct mail at the end of the year. What do you want me to do?
Well, I was reading a Chronicle of Philanthropy article about an organization that fundraising just jumped like 30 or 40% without
Yeah.
a lot of extra investment in fundraising. But what they did, they decided they needed more volunteers.
Mm,
And they got a pro bono marketing campaign to do all this volunteer recruitment, and money poured in. And it's sort of like, if you can engage people in the work and invite them in. There are two ways to communicate with donor. One is sending communications out to them, which is
hmm.
okay, but also you invite them in. And during COVID, we had a lot of fireside chats on Zoom. Remember that, Kathryn?
Yeah.
Fireside
Mhm.
chats on Zoom.
Yeah.
A lot of
Mhm.
engagement, keeping donors in touch. And we are seeing that donors continue to want to know more about their organizations, and they will show up if they're invited, if they're interested.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Catherine, what about the ones like Gail was talking about? And it's funny because I just had that exact conversation with a smaller organization in the last couple of weeks.
Mhm.
They're like, well, we're afraid we're going to overdo it. And I'm like, well, how many times are you communicating? Well, we send out one letter a year and then maybe an email every couple of months. And I'm like, I don't think you're going to overdo it. But what
No,
what do you say to that? Any organization, small or large, that is concerned about over communicating?
I really, in some ways, I agree, 100% agree with what Gail's talking about. And I think in a lot of ways, maybe we need to take the word over communicating out of our vocabulary
Yeah.
because it's not really true. I mean, you might be over communicating if you're just constantly pounding people with how great we are. That might be
Yeah.
problematic, as you know, David, being in the
Yeah.
communication business. But if you're actually sharing, and I think about it like that, we're just sharing the impact of our lovely donors with our donors. If you have the opportunity to invite them to see your work directly, if you have the opportunity for tours, if you have anything to engage in, like Gail said, the ones who are truly interested or have time, and there may be some people who don't have time but are interested, and they'll let you know.
Yeah.
They'll say, I can't come to that, but I'd love to come another time, or please keep me informed. The more, and this is all not about asking either. This is about talking to people about the difference our organization is making, the difference donors are making by impacting the lovely people, animals, whatever we serve. Um,
Yeah.
it's all about those things. And the more you tell, and stories. I mean, David, you all are expert storytellers. I mean,
I love it.
telling people stories is just, about what happened or how something was impacted couldn't be any better. Just these simple stories. And they, are also very powerful. You cannot just take that word over communicating out of your vocabulary.
Yeah. I mean, talk about investments, right? I mean, my 401k, I mean, I get a monthly statement, right, that tells me what,
Right.
and I should probably read it more, but right. But, I mean, they let me know what's going on with my money, right? And
Right.
and I think that that's another way to look at it, that donors want to know what is happening at an organization that they're supporting. I mean,
It's
it,
true.
it's,
I
yeah, I
want
mean, not that you have to account for every penny or any of those things, but I think just letting people know, to your point, Kathryn, of telling a story of letting them know, here's what's happening, here's how you're making a difference, here's how our recipients are thriving now or experiencing something they weren't able to experience. So, I think that's great. And then, uh, there's a constant quest for new donors, right?
Oh,
Which, I don't know if it's a bad thing, but talk about that. Why, it's,
oh,
why is it, I just got a good, I think I just pulled a
moaning over
trigger.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
go ahead,
if I may,
please.
I think about this. I was thinking about this yesterday in the shower. This whole thing about these nonprofit organizations that
Oh,
we don't more. Oh, we need new donors, but you don't need new donors. You need to keep the ones you have, and you need to re-engage the ones that have left you.
Yeah.
right.
Is it easier to get somebody who's given to you before to renew their gift,
Mm,
or is it easier
Hmm.
to get a brand new donor who doesn't know you and not familiar with you? So
right.
Right.
there is so much opportunity in donor retention and renewing donors. And that's why we say keep your donors close, engage your donors so that they keep giving. And I guess it's not intuitive. I guess board members don't understand that the lapsed donors are your largest prospective donor pool
Mm-hmm.
at all levels of giving, both small and large gifts. And we see such a lack of attention given to donor engagement and donor retention. One time I
Yeah.
was doing a workshop for a board, and there was this very sophisticated board member, and I'm talking about the
Mhm.
vocabulary of donor retention and donor attrition. And he said, "Now, what's donor attrition again?"
Oh, wow.
So there is a prime prospect pool, as Kathryn's favorite word, prospect pool.
Mhm.
There are a lot of fish in the pond, right, Kathryn?
There are a lot of fish in the pond. I think that's also data we rarely ever share with board members. Is
Mm,
what the condition, you don't have to use the big old, not big, but the, fundraising jargon in there, but you could say, the people who've given to us over the last 5 years, here's what they look like.
yeah.
And you share that. Here's who's currently giving I mean, not the list, but here's how many are currently giving or have currently given for the last 3 years. Here's how many we have dropped off in that period. You could use that instead of the words like Libent, Sabant, and that type of stuff you don't need to
Yeah.
use with the board. But that kind of thing can really help. And you can then say, can you all help us? Help these and we want to invite this group of donors to come back and
Mm,
talk about that as a strategy, what that takes, the communication you're planning. Maybe it could be a few thank you calls from board members, which are also very valuable, and have a demonstrated return on investment. I don't think we talk about return on investment enough. Board members raise their hands and say, let's do a gala or have some kind of event, and that costs a lot of money. Doesn't have the return impact that people think it has
right.
versus what we're talking about right now. This type of engagement has a huge return on
Yeah.
investment.
Well, and I think there is, I mean, there's some legitimacy to, I think, finding new donors. I think we've run into a number of clients right now who have lost significant amounts of federal funding and have not. So, they've been upside down, if you want to say it. They've got they were 80% reliant on grants and 20%
Mhm.
on that. How are you helping folks maybe address that? Because you can't, if you don't have donors or lapse donors,
Yeah.
where do you go and how do you address that
Well,
while
there's
still keeping your current donors close, right? That 20%, keeping them involved and engaged and maybe increased
Yeah,
investment.
there's a big picture solution, but it's longer term, and that is,
Right.
can we invest in growing, diversifying our fundraising? And it's been my experience that foundations and institutional funders are more open to that than ever.
Mm,
I was reading
Mhm.
today about a revenue or a strategic reserve that was given by a foundation to an organization to use in building up its funding base, and then the
yeah.
money would be returned to the strategic reserve for other uses. So it was designed to be spent.
Right.
And the board members were having an argument, oh, it's our reserve fund. We can't draw down on it. We're drawing down, we're not going to pay it back.
Well, isn't that what a reserve fund is for, though? I mean,
That's a whole nother, we don't have to have
I mean,
another podcast,
it's a
David.
reserve. You're reserving it for a reason. You're not reserving it for the sake of reserving it, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you invest some money in fundraising and it's going to pay back,
right.
2, 3 or 4 or 10 times what you
Yeah.
invested. So
Yeah.
it keeps going back to strategy and decision making about leadership.
It
Yeah.
really does. And I'll say too, that acquisition, and all of us here know this, that acquisition, nobody's really opposed to, I mean, we all sighed when we said new donors because there are people out there who just said that's all they want you to do is acquisition.
Sure. Right.
But acquisition is the most expensive strategy.
Right.
And then when you're going to create an acquisition strategy, you need to create the retention strategy that goes with it.
Good
So,
point.
because the acquisition of a new donor, those people are most likely to be the ones that drop off the second year. Higher
Well,
percentage of them will leave even in the
yeah.
second year. They might respond to that first appeal, but you really need to put the donor retention strategy in there with that in order to try to retain as many of those you've acquired as possible. As we're talking about, that all requires investment. So
Yeah.
that investment needs to be laid out specifically, and it is a longer game, a longer term game.
Well,
It's
what
tough for these organizations that were reliant on significant amount of federal funding that became certainly at risk, if not disappeared
and
altogether.
how are you counseling your clients who are facing some degree of crisis, not to get hyperbolic about it, but a crisis in their funding? How are they able to maintain trust and still be vulnerable, right? What does that look like?
Well, I want to tell my story about the recession when I was coaching one of our Major Gifts Intensive
Sure.
participants. This was a historic preservation group in the South, and they were lived off of earned income and a few donors from the tours of their houses that they have. So
Mm,
that was their funding or their revenue model. And it turned out that they had to close because of COVID and the pandemic and the shutdown. They had to close their houses and didn't have any revenue for over a year.
wow.
And this lady, Elizabeth Walden, had registered for our Major Gifts Intensive to build up a major gift program. And so I said to her, and this is a strategy that just about any size organization can use. I said, Elizabeth, why don't you make a list of your top 20 funders or donors and start sending them a really kind, very honest and open update letter. And you could create an email list and send it by email and say, you're one of a very few key supporters, and I want to make sure we keep you informed and abreast of our progress.
Mm,
Progress, that's
yeah.
the word. And I told Elizabeth, I said, be transparent, but don't whine. There's a difference, right? Be forthright. We have lost 80% of our earned revenue and we've laid off 2 staff, but we know we're going to make it through and we've tightened our belts and we look forward to seeing you on the other side. Or, just that's a combination of being forthright with the facts, but being also hopeful.
Yeah. That relentless optimism you talked
And you
about.
know what? A couple of months into this program, this guy shows up at her doorstep with a $45,000 check. And he
It's
said,
amazing how that happens.
he said, I really like your communication and your transparency.
Wow.
Then 2 years later, this lady, apparently she kept it up. I should ask her to send me a copy of one of those notes.
I know. That would be a master class in
Her
how to.
lady walked in and said, I am so impressed with your communication and your transparency. I want to make $1 million gift,
Oh my gosh.
250,000 a year for the next 4 years.
Wow.
And Elizabeth said she cried, the donor hugged.
Well, I think people overestimate the I know there's a lot of cynicism in the world today, but I think when you are transparent and when you are forthcoming with information, in a way that projects, to your point, projects not a sense of panic, but more so just an informative posture, right? That we're letting you know this, we're asking, you to, continue to support us in any way that you can, engage us in any way that you can, let us know how we can, be supportive of you, any of those things, right? Just any of those kinds of messages that I think engage those donors, to keep those donors close, as you've talked about. I think 90% of donors are likely going to respond positively to that, right? And maybe 10% say, you know what, I'm out. But that they're definitely going to be the exception and not the rule, in my experience. So.
I mean, I think too, keep in mind always donors are donors because they want to be donors. They're not convinced or suddenly, but show up one day and decide I'll be philanthropic today, because that's the way they're wired. And it's not about their interests, it's about their values. So to Gail's point, in like that coaching that she did, with that client, remember that transparency, and also talking about not just how this impacts the organization, which it does, but how the organization is addressing it so that its services continue into the world, which is what the donor really ultimately, that's the values connection. So that's really important. And donors don't see that as, I mean, what you don't want to do is go to a donor with like Chicken Little.
Right.
It's falling, sky's falling.
Right.
You don't want to do that. You want to go with like, here's where we are, here's our plan for now, and here's what we're looking to do. And that, all of that, very clear, very transparent, calm. Again, if the donor asks you questions that maybe you don't have an answer for at that time, it's okay to say, we have not yet developed our plan for that at this point in time. We are working on it.
What makes me nervous is when I don't hear from an organization, right? I mean, that it's like, where are they? What are they doing?
Right.
Why aren't they talking? So.
But David, we want to go firmly on record with it is still a golden age for capital campaigns.
Yeah, talk about that.
Let me tell you why. And giving follows the stock market. There's research after research after research. And yes, everybody's nervous about the stock market. It's a bubble, but the fact is that donors have appreciated stock, and their retirement funds are appreciated, and foundations and institutional funders, endowments have skyrocketed as well. And I know the foundations are getting a lot more requests, which they probably should, but your donors are pretty flush with money they didn't have, or assets they didn't have 2 years ago because of the stock market. And so we are seeing a lot of campaign gifts don't come out of a disposable income. They come out of other assets like retirement accounts and a lot of appreciated stock. I was reading an article about the Nature Conservancy recently, and they were training their field staff to have deeper conversations with their donors about assets. And again, I think that's a scary conversation to have.
Yeah.
When I worked for Duke and Carolina, I don't think I ever brought that up. Did you bring it up, Kathryn?
Well, yeah, I did. So
She was ahead of her time, Gail.
No, I didn't. But I mean, that, a lot of that's the way that, I mean, I remember back when I was at St. Mary's School, of course, that was when the stock market, that first one round where it was really so great. I'm trying to remember which year. I don't, well, it was in the 90s, so I'll say that. So the stock markets was really had a really good period. There was one year that 50% of the funds that cash or cash equivalent stocks would be cash equivalents, came in stock transfers to the school.
Wow.
Half the money we raised. We raised over $2 million every year on an annual basis. That didn't include the campaign that we were working on. So that a lot of that came too. So that was, so, and it will ebb and flow because there was a little bubble that went in the late 90s, I think. And we saw our stock transfer because they should still transfer stock over cash. But the minute your stock portfolios drop, people immediately go to cash and shift, even though that's not the better advantageous strategy. But nonetheless, you can't convince people about that, nor do you need to. But anyway, that, so that it does ebb and flow a little bit, how much of that may come in those assets. But, there's a lot of other things we have now that we didn't have, donor advised funds, for example, or giving through the IRA, which didn't come into place until 2006 for the first time.
Yeah.
And, all of those things are things that if you don't really know anything about, you should know
Yeah.
something about. And now the qualified charitable distributions from IRA are very common.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Look,
I've heard that story often. Yeah.
we
Mhm.
want to go on record as saying there's still plenty of opportunity out there.
Yeah.
100%.
Opportunity. And even the small organizations that have lost 80% of their funding because of government, they still have a small donor base.
Yeah.
And they can find, who knows, maybe some of these people, if they're forthright, if they're transparent, if they're
Yeah.
optimistic, and they're willing to go there.
Yeah, they probably haven't peaked on their giving possibilities, right? So they're giving opportunities. So as we wrap up, thank you both for all the amazing information and insights. I know we could continue talking for hours about all of these things, and I know folks want to learn more about that. Before we kind of give them where they can go to learn more, what are one or two kind of quick things as we approach end of year? This should be coming out before end of year season hits. What are a couple of key takeaways that people should think about as they go to this end of year and then starting into this new year?
I can think of about 5, I would say right now.
Okay.
But there's a sleeper donor base that you're not paying attention to, and it's the
Okay.
people who are making gifts through their DAFs, their donor advised funds.
Mm,
Lots of times, especially in smaller nonprofits, the staff that opens the envelopes is not or processes gifts is not aware to be on the lookout for a donor advised fund gift.
hmm.
Like as Kathryn says, Kathryn, what do you say about a donor advised fund donor? They got plenty.
It's usually a sign that they possibly have more to do. It can vary a little bit, but yes, it's something to definitely, like Gail's saying, you definitely should pay attention to your donor advised fund donors. You should pay attention to your donors who transfer stock. You should
Mm,
pay attention to your donors who give IRA people. Any of those that are outside of just a cash check. I mean, you should pay attention to all your donors, but
right.
but how someone gives is a little signal that there potentially, doesn't guarantee it, potentially could be something more there, that you should be talking to them.
I mean, I think every donor with a DAF, a donor advised fund, should be highlighted as a major donor prospect until
Yeah.
they qualify them because they have set money aside for
Mhm.
philanthropy, which means they're philanthropic.
Yeah.
That is an opportunity just sitting right there. And
Mhm.
the other completely different strategy on smaller everyday donors is Giving Tuesday. Giving days are coming up, right after Thanksgiving, Giving Tuesday. I'm sure your company's working on materials, I hope.
Oh yeah, we are
But if you can make Giving
neck
Tuesday
deep right now.
if you can make it into a game, a celebration. I've heard of organizations that only do a thank-a-thon on Giving Tuesday and the
Yeah.
money showers in. So it
Mhm.
doesn't have to, and it's a great opportunity for board members to make new contacts, and it's like a social media party.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm all for Giving Tuesday. I think it's a wonderful idea. I would pour some resources and attention into that right now as well for
Yeah.
a quick bump for the year end. And I'd look at those lapsed donors to make sure that they renew their gifts before December 31st. How about
Yeah.
you, Kathryn?
Yeah, we were talking about trends and educating board. Find a trend. It doesn't have it doesn't have to be all of them.
Yeah.
One of them this would be sufficient. And use that as an opportunity in your next board meeting when you are shooting your development report to say, start with that, start with the trend, kind of whatever it could be. Like the Giving USA data is really good, just because oftentimes board members think everything comes from corporations.
Mm,
They're the smallest group of
Alice.
donors out there. Individuals are where it's at.
yeah.
It could be something about your communications and donor engagement or
Yeah.
retention, stuff like that. Yeah, I think just focus on a trend, use it to educate your board. You may find something really unique that you actually could adopt for your organization too.
That's great. And if people want to have you come help their board shift their mindset, how can they learn more about Gail Perry Group?
They can go to our website and we've got a contact form and we will just fill out the form and we'll be right back in touch. Love to help you.
Yeah, they're again just a great organization, a great group of folks, and very talented and super smart. So grateful for that. Well,
We have
thank you both for your time and for all that you do for the nonprofit sector. Grateful for that. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you found us today, you know where to find us in the future. But if anybody knows anybody who might make a good guest on our podcast, we welcome those as well. So thank you both so much, and wish you all the best as we wrap up the giving of 2025. So
Thanks, David. It's a real pleasure to be with you. And we always greatly and deeply appreciate the partnership we've had with you and will continue to have.
Ditto on our side. We're so grateful for that. So thank you both, and look forward to staying in touch. Take care.
Thank
Thank you.